because I have a new mic, I should maybe make it more professional, Jamie. Welcome to the VC React podcast. No, that's not me.
We've lost
Every
the
week-
listeners. Awkward stuff.
Every week, we bring you insights and reactions from top VCs reacting to weekly news on startups, VC funds, and investment rounds. In today's episode, we will talk about podcast and investing in a podcasting platform, climate tech and the carbon credits as an asset class, AdTech and attracting international investors to MENA, and micromobility and regional VCs investing globally. We have a great episode for you today with two experienced VCs. Ahmad Masri, partner at Silicon Badia, and Hussein Attar, CEO at TechInvest.com. And I have to say this, Hussein is also the creator of the famous free ecosystem directory that has a list of everyone, like all VCs, venture builders, accelerators, engine networks, and much more. In the video description, you can find more details on our guests, their LinkedIn profiles, and links to their company's websites. And I will also share the link to Hussein's directory. Our weekly news are brought to you by FWDstart, a twice-weekly newsletter that breaks down what's happening in the MENA startup, VC, and tech space. And as always, from FWDstart, we have my co-host, Jamie Lane. What's happening this week, Jamie?
Good morning, Ahmad. Yeah, we're going to get kind of meta this morning and talk about podcasting, not a podcast.
Yeah, exactly.
Podeo, UAE-based podcast distribution platform. They've raised a 5.4 million Series A funding round. So that was led by RSA Capital, as well as the EBikes Fund, who we were chatting about last week, Cedar Monday Ventures, Snarium, ISME, as well as returning investor Razor Capital. So the funding is going to support Podeo's expansion into other emerging markets. So it's looking at LATAM, Southeast Asia, Eastern Europe, etc. So startup itself was founded in 2020. And I have a confession as well to make, Ahmed. Stefano, actually, I believe he listens to the podcast because he reached out to me, I think it was the end of August, and I missed his message because he actually couldn't find it on podcast distribution platforms. And he asked if we needed any help getting it up. And I didn't see the message until I went to congratulate him this week. So
Okay.
I know where Stefano's bad
If
books
he's
are not.
listening,
But
yes, we need your help, and we will appreciate your help. So let's
absolutely, yeah. But yeah, founded back in 2020, as I mentioned, in Lebanon. It's an all-in-one platform, so helps podcast creators produce, distribute, and monetize. So end-to-end, it's already built a subscriber base of about 50 million across the Arab world. And interestingly enough, I suppose it's been around in some sort of form since 2015. I think it was originally sort of a high school project for Stefano, and eventually it grew into something more and really took off in the aftermath of the Beirut explosion in 2020. It sort of became a platform for people to share stories and messages of hope and so on in the wake of that. I guess in terms of their strategy with regard to expansion, they sort of avoided some of the conventional sort of podcast discoverability side of things, so while the platform distributes content on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, etc., it's also sort of some innovative, I suppose you'd say, distribution channels. So for instance, they partnered up with Dubai Taxis, I think a couple of months back. So you can listen to it now and you're whatever in Dubai Taxis. They also partnered up
airlines,
with
I
InFlight.
guess, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So InFlight Entertainment, and Uvu, I think they might work at Emirates, I believe, a couple of other different airlines as well. So all with a view, I suppose, to expanding the audience reach. It's a free to use model, which is interesting. So they've completely got rid of subscription fees. So it's all sort of advertising led. There's some additional monetization opportunities as well, memberships, tipping, etc. But a decentralized distribution strategy, which is pretty interesting.
Thank you, Jamie. Before we get into the details of this deal, let me start with this. Why this surge in podcasting? We have so many popular podcasts, especially in Saudi, saying Radio Thamania, they have multiple podcasts. Even in Jordan, we have Jocast. We have multiple other podcasts in Lebanon and Dubai, everywhere. There are 10 million podcast listeners in MENA, according to a study. And the majority of listeners are from Saudi, Egypt, and UAE. And there's a study that says 15% of the population of Saudi Arabia, around 5.1 million people, tune into a podcast at least once a week. There are hundreds of podcasts, millions of viewers. Do you think podcasts are here to stay?
Well, my theory, I think it's correlated with Riyadh traffic.
Okay.
Because I think really, as we've seen Riyadh grow as a city, many people tried to fill that commute time. It started with music, and we noticed new radio stations being added up into the Saudi station network. And then we noticed that the rise of podcasts. And I think post-corona, where with that social media app, Clubhouse, where it grew and everyone was getting used to listening into useful discussions. And then we looked into Twitter and Spaces, and all of that grew where people were excited to just have something on the background, listening into intellectual discussions happening. And to your point, the mania at the same time during those periods grew in an exponential way, playing into the podcast and other media venues, whether it was documentaries and videos, where they really captured people's interest, and it made people feel that they are learning a lot. They are getting to know new people and new knowledge just by listening in. And I think that little by little grew the listeners and people recommending their best podcasts to each other. And it became part of our society, I guess.
What's
and
your best podcast?
My it's more on the entrepreneurship side. So it's one of the Thamania ones.
Is it Sawalif Business?
Sawalif Business, yes,
Yeah,
exactly.
yeah.
Really to the point, great speakers, great host. He really knows how to bring out interesting stories from the people he brings in. Also, another one that was very popular, the one for Omar Jaresi, the one where he brings all the top leaders in the Saudi vision and really gets you the insights of what each one has in place for what they want to do in Saudi. And that really helps us maybe as VCs or as other business people, where you actually know where the kingdom is going, what are things they're focusing on, so that you can align with that.
Nice. Hamid, what do you think about podcasting, and what's your favorite podcast as well?
Interesting.
Aside from us, of course. Aside from
obviously, yeah. You see, I think this is a rare opportunity, Ahmad, where we can kind of flip the script and have you do most of the talking here, since the subject matter is about podcasting, you and Jamie. But no, look, I mean, just kind of agreeing with everything Hussein said, and maybe adding a few things. I think, I think just in general, the trends for media consumption really changed while we were all in lockdown a few years ago. From internet radio to podcasting and so on and so forth, I think people's habits really changed. And I think a big part of that, not to be conspiratorial or anything, is that, a lot of a lot of the big podcasters, like let's say Joe Rogan, just got access to guests that didn't really have to adhere to traditional studio rules. It was quite unfiltered. You just get people kind of giving their opinions, and a lot of these opinions ended up being a lot more qualified than the so-called experts. And then that just kind of spread like wildfire, right? So, you had guys like the All In podcast just giving you under the hood, kind of opening the kimono kind of situation. So I think that was very thrilling for all of us. And I think we kind of just take it for granted now that I could just find a podcast with the most serious practitioners on it. And so I think that really contributed to that. So I think it's a lot about, kind of consumption models, and I think that's going to change. Or I think that's here to stay, rather. And it's really going to change more and more how we consume media. In terms of my favorite podcasts, I mean, I mentioned Rogan a little bit a while ago. I do like his. I love Thamania, at least in terms of the Arabic speaking ones. I like what Mo Islam is doing as well. So, that'll be my three.
Okay, love that. So let's move on to Podeo. So Podeo claims to offer an end-to-end monetization platform for podcast creators, and a market dominated by the big players, Spotify, Apple, and now YouTube podcasts. Do you think there is room for a regional player to maybe carve out a niche with a unique monetization model? How are they different?
I think any localized version helps people manage the gap between the international ones and the local experience. However, I would say there are some local players, maybe before Podio, like Muhtawaz and Mics, and I think Anghami tried to enter into the space also. But I believe since they started earlier and they were able to little by little grow their user base and listener base, they were able to capture and maintain those listeners in the long run, which helped them do this type of investment into it. I think it's still there's still space in this market. I don't think the international ones are going to look into creating their own operations. They'll look at maybe acquisition. I think that's what excites people into the space. It's the possibility of an exit through one of these giants once they have a solid base to sell.
Yeah, Hamid, what do you think of their business model?
Well, to be honest, Ahmed, I'd love to have a look at their deck because I think
Okay.
one of the bigger I'd love more details on that to give a more qualified answer. But I think if they can crack the monetization bit for themselves and for the creators, I think that's the name of the game, right? So I feel like platforms like Spotify, are notoriously known for paying less than some of the other platforms, right? Like YouTube, like Tidal. I think Tidal pays out like 4 times more than Spotify, but I think the distribution and the reach for Spotify kind of counterbalances that. So I think for Podio, I think that's their challenge. How do you present yourself as a platform for distribution for these creators, and like as a great alternative beyond, I think, what a lot of these LLMs are doing in terms of localization. So I feel like that would be their big challenge.
Maybe I'll add to that also. There are several government agencies who are trying to create different initiatives, and one of their usually checklist part is we create a podcast about this. So you notice Fintech Saudi, Munshaat, and all of the different Saudi agencies when they feel they want to reach out to people or educate people and so on, it's a podcast, and they don't know how to do it. So they usually try to subcontract that to someone who might be able to bring the right people, manage the whole distribution, manage the whole advertisement of it, and all they need to do is just give a check and make sure it runs. So many of these companies are monetizing on that type of revenue stream. I'm not sure Podo does that with the local people, but maybe I guess with the Dubai ones, that clients you mentioned, they've noticed the demand there of people wanting to get into the space.
Maybe kind of, reverting the question back to you. So like, as a podcaster, why would you kind of go and do it on Podeo versus, the other platforms that are available, like just from a user perspective?
Yeah, so, and Jamie, please jump in here. Disclaimer, I have invested in a podcasting tool called Zencastr in the US. It's an amazing tool, and they help you with creation and distribution as well. And they bring you some ads, not as sophisticated ad system as what Podeo is offering right now, because Podeo is like everywhere, in taxis and airlines and everywhere. This is attractive to me, this part at least. And on top of that, for example, Zencastr and all of the other podcasting tools, as Jamie mentioned, they have a subscription model. So you have to pay like $30 or $40 a month to use the tool. Except for Spotify, for example. It's free, but it's not a creation tool. It's more like a distribution channel. With Podeo, it seems that, hey, you don't pay anything and you distribute to millions of listeners through their network, and you get paid by the advertisers if you get advertisers who want to advertise on your content. So it seems very attractive, honestly. Jamie?
Yeah, I think it's the ease of monetization as well. I think it's a big thing. The fact that it's programmatic advertising from the vantage points of us, for example, obviously that takes an enormous amount of hassle out of the equation. And I guess it being regional specific as well, obviously there's greater alignment probably between the advertisers who are actually engaging with Podeo than there would be with, I don't know, US alternative, where potentially the adverts are more jarring, or they're probably not even available because of whatever geo-targeting that those advertisers are potentially engaging in. So I guess it's the monetization component and Yeah, I guess as well as that, look, it's the seamless distribution. The fact that, you know, you can upload it to one platform instead of manually going to Spotify, Apple Podcast, Amazon Podcast, whatever. Obviously, that takes the hassle out of it, which is pretty attractive. But you handle the technical side of things, Ahmed, so.
Yeah, I actually go to everyone. No, actually, so on Spotify, they have this feature where you can publish your podcast on different platforms, but you have to set up the account on Apple Podcast, for example, and then on Amazon Podcast, and then you add the RSS feed, and then whenever you publish on Spotify, it goes to Apple and Amazon at the same time. But YouTube is separate, so I have to do YouTube separately.
Maybe just last thing before we move to the next subject. I think what worries me maybe as an investor into this space, I don't know if you've noticed recently the AI podcasters. So having two AIs actually go through a whole discussion and so on, and whether this will increase people like and maybe reduce the creatives in the market due to being replaced by AI. That's a bit of a worry. I'm not sure how much it will benefit or make it harder for these companies to have something unique, because again, if anyone can create different content and have that in their distribution network, then how can you differentiate yourself from them? It's a interesting concept to think of, futuristic wise.
Let's give Google a free ad here. So there is a new tool called Notebook LM. A friend was showing me the other day. He created a whole podcast on there. So he gave the tool the topic, and the tool created the content, the voices as guests. It's all synthetic. 2 or 3 guests are discussing the topic of that specific thing that he wanted to create a podcast on.
It's crazy. It's like this cadence as well of the voice and like pauses and like it's so natural. It's absolutely insane. It's 1 hour less work for us, Ahmed, potentially.
Hey, we wanna see the people and talk to them.
We'll be replaced. It's inevitable. Give it a year.
Yeah. Okay. My last question on this before we move on. Let's talk about the venture capital industry. Do you think it's important for VC funds to have their own podcast? Like, for example, we know Noah Capital, they have their own podcast, and there is a lot of other VC firms in Silicon Valley, for example, with very popular podcasts. Do you think it's important for VCs or not?
I think it's a good avenue to help educate people about the industry, help see the struggles or the lessons learned from these entrepreneurs, because they have the access. They are able to get these founders or these investors on there and help share that type of content. I think what happens sometimes is some of them get excited. They run something and they don't maintain it because, again, it's not core to their activity. I think Noah Capital are the only ones that really believed that this is a good venue, and they saw the benefit out of it, and they continued to maintain it. I've noticed there are other ones that just tried it out. Again, it's digital content, and it will be out there forever for people to consume. But I think they'll lose their user base if they don't continue to add more and more content, because again, that's the game of the play, where you have to continuously create more content for people to consume so that you can maintain that user base.
Yeah, just from my point of view, I think it's a great way to differentiate yourself from the crowd. You know, over the past couple of years with the growth of the creator economy, which we'll talk about a little bit maybe, but you know, I think as far as VCs go, I don't see why they shouldn't also be a community-led, let's say, product. If VCs are offering money and good advice, I think a great way to advertise that is through a podcast where you can come in and say, you know, hey, here are our partners. They show up like, you know, whatever, once a month or once a week. They do a deep dive, and this is the quality of people we have. It also generates inbound for you, right? As far as pipeline goes, and I think that's really important. Like as VCs, I think it's half the job getting good pipeline, and then just kind of communicating to that great pipeline why it should be you and not venture fund XYZ. Money's fungible at the end of the day, and then you know you get a board seat. So, you know, I do think it's a great way to do it. I think one of my favorites is not boring capital in the US, and the guy, his name is Packy McCormick. He basically started a newsletter first. You know, he was just writing these long essays and then now he's kind of dabbling in podcasting as well. And I think, you know, he's a solo GP because of that. So I think there's some good things out there. But listen, I just want to mention one last point on Podio. I think the brilliance of the model, if it works, is that they'll be tapping into a massive creator economy, right? So you know, we are in the creator economy right now. We're talking about 40 million self-employed professionals in MENA. A lot of these are podcasters and content creators, right? And so I think if a platform can exist where, you know, you can first work on the podcasting bit, on the distribution bit, and then get into all of their other needs, you know, like monetization, banking, marketing. And it could be a full suite. It could really become, you know, a super platform for these creators. So I think that's where it's exciting for me, at least.
I love that. Love that. Okay, Jamie, move us to the next story, please.
Chat a bit about climate tech. Yeah, there's been quite a number of investments kind of in this kind of corporate carbon management space. I think over the course of the last year, you had Zero raised 2.3 million back in March. Startup called Olive Gaia, it scored 1 million about this time last year. You have someone like Carbon Cipher as well. And now adding to the mix, you have UAE-based Coral. So they've raised a 3 million seed round to scale its AI-driven platform. Of course it is, that automates carbon. I mean, don't worry, there's a blockchain part coming up as well, Ahmad.
Okay.
So, automates carbon data collection, footprint evaluation, reporting, and offsetting. So haven't disclosed the investors, but apparently they have a combined 4 years of experience, which is reassuring. And they're going to use this to expand into new markets. In terms of the platform itself, designed to simplify carbon emissions management. So it's a single system. You can monitor, offset carbon footprint. Its API works for sectors like delivery, tourism, utilities, etc. So real-time offsetting solutions into the operation. They also have an e-commerce component. So businesses, there's like a one-click offset integration. I've seen a couple of those on different Shopify plugins, etc. But it seems like this is targeting something similar. Now for the blockchain part. So its blockchain backend ensures full lifecycle traceability of carbon credits, along with real-time auditability to guarantee transparency and quality. So that is quite an interesting use case. In fairness, it must be said.
It's a valid one, honestly.
Yeah, it's a valid. I'll let it pass. I won't make another smart comment about it. I won't be overly disparaging. And it actually mentioned as much as well, interestingly, like in the press release, their director of operations research, that they're, what did he say exactly? He said that they're going beyond buzzwords like AI and blockchain. Well, arguable. They're proud to demonstrate how these advanced technologies can simplify data collection, analysis, reporting, offering real value to users. They're going to be opening an office in Abu Dhabi as well, I believe. So said enough on Coral, I think, for now. I'll be quiet.
Okay, before we dig into Coral, are you seeing more climate tech startups in the pipelines? If yes, what kind of companies?
Yes, we've been seeing more and more. I believe there are different ways they're coming in, whether it was international companies trying to expand into MENA, local ones trying to be built up, but they're still in their very early stage, seed stage. And we're seeing Ministry of Communication, MCIT, as trying to create an accelerator to support them in their earlier stage. We're seeing ones that are trying to shift their business model towards climate tech, trying to build up towards the new trend. There are more of them, but what I've noticed maybe that I haven't seen many of them get investments from your typical VCs that we see in the region. So they're usually a climate tech fund that either invest international and they invested in this company that's in MENA, or they are part supported by government agencies that are trying to bring the technology in, but again, invested and created a good PR for them. These are the ones I've been seeing in the market.
Ahmad.
Yeah, I agree with Hussein. I actually been seeing a lot more announcements on climate tech funds than I've been seeing climate tech startups in our pipeline. Look, I think Hussein's point is very interesting and very valid. So for tech VCs like Silicon Badia, for example, you know, we're kind of using the playbook of, you know, founder problem fit, product market fit, then exponential growth going from, whatever, 50K in MRR to 250K in MRR, right, over 2 to 3 years, and hyper scalability like that. So, typically we're dealing with software businesses and digital infrastructure. When it comes to climate tech, most of the companies that I've seen have some kind of a hardware component to them. So I've seen a lot of Internet of Things. I've seen a lot of kind of devices, which are all great, right? But when you start considering hardware as part of the equation, you kind of have to think about a different investing model, because you do have different scalability issues there. You do have very different kind of mindsets and accounting or management accounting kind of spectrums there as well. So I've seen a very interesting one in Tunisia called What Now, which just raised around a couple of weeks ago. They're doing amazing things, but again, like, there's a big hardware component, so it's a question of time horizons and so on. And then you have others that are very closely tied to, let's say, clean tech and solar, which again kind of ride on these 25-year PPAs. So it's a bit of a different beast in my opinion.
Okay, so Jamie, you touched a little bit on the Carol's business model and what they do. Did any of you research this company and can tell us exactly what their business model is, more details? Who do they sell to? Who are their customers? What actually they sell? And why is it good enough to attract venture funding?
To be honest, I haven't, but I can predict which type of companies. Now you'll notice that there is a new initiative in Saudi called Riyadh Green, and the Green Initiative that the whole government is pushing for. And it's part of the Vision 2030 also. So all of these are signals to all the big corporations that they'll need at one time in the future to start making sure they have the right fundamentals for these. So we notice Saudi and other, the airlines are the easiest ones to enter into the space because it's very clear, aligned with all the others. These are the miles, these are the carbon credits you have to, and apparently they're trying to see if their clientele, their travelers are interested into doing that, so they'll add that part of the payment mechanism where you can offset your carbon credits of flying and how you can monitor it. And I think that's where we mentioned blockchain entering there, making sure transparency is a key issue, because there was lots of people who tried to monetize over this, and it seems there were lots of fake data, things that weren't really happening. So blockchain entered into the space within the climate tech discussion, just to manage the transparency, the trust into these different initiatives that these corporations are trying to do. And I think from the corporation level, it's a checklist that they're trying to maintain. But again, I don't think many of them will do it unless they're pressured to, or whether it was government-wise or from their clients. And I haven't seen that yet, but I think they're all building up to make sure once they have to, it's in the works. But I've talked to some experts in the field. Corporate carbon credit is coming, and it will be forced. It will start from the top people, the Aramcos and Sabics and all the big ones, and then it will trickle down to the smaller SMEs. But also, it will be part of building construction. It will be part of all these different requirements to make sure you are compliant to the required rules at this time. So again, it is something there. I think in the West or in the other places in the world, they're much more advanced into this, and I think the pressure there might have been coming from the LPs and the high net worth individuals who are pushing the funds to make sure they have ESGs, and these are the command, and that's the trickle down part of it. We haven't seen that yet here.
So Hamid, it seems that the company, like Hussein mentioned, the company is building for the future. The regulations are coming. They're not here yet. We don't have emissions caps yet in here, like in the EU, for example. We don't have yet the concept of the carbon credits, but it's coming. So the company is building for that new future. And what they do is they sell either companies to offset their carbon emissions, or they offer this service to the company's consumers, where if you buy something on an e-commerce website, you can offset your carbon footprint. What do you think of that model?
Listen, I was part of the first wave in 2005 or 2006 when these carbon credits slash tradable permits were first being experimented with in Europe, and I was living there at the time, and I looked at a few business models there, and I think it's very important to kind of touch upon the reasons they failed in 2005 and six, right? Because it was an experiment and then it kind of died out. I think two or three of the most cited reasons were like related to errors, overestimations, fraud in kind of how you count your carbon credits and your emissions as well. And then there was a bit of an oversupply in carbon credits, which kind of tanked their prices. So as an asset class, it just kind of failed in that way. The other bit was Europe or the European Union emissions trading system was way more advanced than anything else out there, and there wasn't really a lot of regulation in other markets. And since this is an offsetting game, it needs to be a global game, right? So the industries or the countries or the players that are not emitting would sell their carbon credits to those that are emitting. So by definition, it's a global game. And I think this is where the blockchain bits actually do make sense, because you do have a ledger that you can't really tamper with easily, at least. You have a lot of transparency. You have the entire ecosystem being your auditor as well. So you're kind of mitigating a lot of these factual errors in reporting, and you're also kind of creating a system of accountability there. The other thing I would say is a lot of these industries were not regulated or mandated to reduce emissions, whereas now we have, a lot. I mean, especially in Saudi, especially in the UAE. So I feel like this is a good time to kind of conduct this experiment again. And I do feel like our region has a big role to play, since we are big producers of fossil fuels, and we have rising industries as well. So I think this kind of startup comes at the right time, to be honest.
Ahmad, I'll stay with you for a second. You mentioned the carbon credits as an asset class. And I learned today that some hedge funds are actually trading carbon credits. Like they buy it from companies who reduce their emissions so that they have more credits, their extra credits, they sell them. And then those hedge funds would buy them and sell them at a higher price to some others, or wait until it's more expensive. And I actually checked the prices today for carbon credits in the EU. I think it's around 60 euros now, down from last year. It was around 100 euros. Have you invested in this? Did you know anything about this?
Well, look, I think hedge funds will create a financial instrument out of anything, right? So, but look, I mean, just in general, the way I think about asset classes is pretty much anything that has demand or supply. Just because it's kind of listed on some exchange, just kind of legitimizes it a bit more and creates more liquidity. But essentially, if there's demand and supply over anything, whether it's a commodity or else, you can call that an asset class. I have not invested in this asset class, but I'm very interested to see how it goes. But again, I think, before you have a framework of how these carbon credits are created,
audited,
it'll be, like think about Bitcoin, for example. We have very clear rules now about how Bitcoin is minted, and yet we still can't figure out why it's trading at 65K or 60K or whatever it is today. So I think with carbon credits, you might not face exactly the same thing, because the derivative or the underlying, let's say, use case is I think a bit clearer. But I think, like trying to determine what the price is going to be very difficult, at least for a guy like me. But maybe you'll have traders out there that disagree with that.
Jamie, what's the next story before we decide now to create a cryptocurrency for carbon credits? Take us to the next story.
We'll brainstorm the name once the recording ends for a new.
And we will announce it in a week.
Exactly. We'll have the drop. But let's go to a company that I think Hussein might be quite familiar with, as an AdTech invest. would have backed Quantum. So they're a Saudi omnichannel AdTech and data platform. So they've just secured an investment from Hearst Labs. So this is part of their pre-Series A round for 7 million, which is ongoing, I believe. So this is Hearst Labs' first investment in the Middle East. The company itself, I've conflicting reports on this. You might be able to clear it up. Hussein, the press release yesterday mentioned 2020, but I believe it was 2018. Would I be right in thinking 2018 is when it first kicked off?
Yes, 2018. That's correct.
Perfect. Okay. Oh, perfect. Correct record. Fantastic. So in terms of, I guess, how the platform functions, essentially connects advertisers with publishers through the platform, so enables them to purchase ad space directly. They also have advanced data analytics, etc., to optimize campaign performance. They have other services as well, like e-sampling, in-store activations, etc. Work with a ton of big name FMCG players in the region. So you have your Unilevers, Mondelez, P&G, PepsiCo, etc. And as I alluded to at the beginning there, they previously raised a 2.6 million seed round that was backed by Tech Investcom and Vision Ventures, with participation as well from 500 as well. It was back in 2021, I want to say. In terms of Hearst Labs, a small bit of context, I guess, background on them too. So they're founded in 2015, invested in over 70 women-led startups globally, with AUM of about $2.5 billion. Resources span a load of different sectors, so media, fintech, health tech, transport, etc. But this is their first excursion to this side of the world.
Well, Hussein, we'll start with you. You've invested in this company. What do you
Yes.
think makes Quantum an attractive opportunity for an investor like you and for Hearst Lab? How did you or did the founders reach out to this big investor and convince them to invest in the region?
Sure. Let me start from the beginning, because Quantum, once it started, is a bit different of where it is at this moment. And in fact, I think that's the reality of many of the startups. So in the beginning, they built a model where they helped brands with their sampling products. So what that meant, that they were connected to all of these different channels or e-commerce channels, which was Hunger Station, Jahiz, Jareer, and all of those. And those channels had not yet developed audience segmentation in the right way. So they knew they had customers, but their genders, where they live, their society status, whether they were like married with kids, financially, how are they? They did not have that much data about them. At the same time, you had brands who were very interested in doing advertisement in a more optimized way. They've tried all the social media ones, and it gave them some exposure. But when it came to the sampling part, their only venue was this random distribution of samples, where it might return some return on investment, but usually they don't know how to track them. So they noticed there was a gap there, and they created a digital way to monetize this in the right way, where both parties are happy, where they allow these brands to target these audiences through the digital channels, who have some data about those audience, but could not be able to optimize, understand them, or be able to segment them in the right way, so that the right sampling goes to the right people. And that was the thesis of what Quantum was providing at the beginning, which at that time when they presented to me was something unique. And almost anything unique to me is something that lets me sit with them on the table and start to understand how they actually work. And then we noticed all the big clientele brands that are operating with them. That got us more interested. All the big channels are working with them and utilizing their solution, because they want to understand their audience better. And they noticed they're using the same solution of Quantum to be able to target their audience, because it gave them the right data, the right information about their audience, and be able to reach out for their internal advertisement. That was a great model. And I think during Corona, it got a bit hit in terms of the sampling industry. Everyone reduced that, as it was more of a luxury than something they would use right away. So all advertisement was reduced. So they had to pivot their model in a bit. What they noticed was the core engine of that audience segmentation part. And they were able to output that as a SaaS solution for the channels, or the Jahiz and the ones, and notice that they are willing to pay to be able to understand their audience and manage campaigns, people who want to advertise with them. So they were able to pivot, restructure, and make sure they have this core engine that allows all of these different channels to do this targeted advertisement and utilize all the brands that were already using Quantum, or they had external ones to utilize the same platform, manage the campaigns, all the payments and everything being done as a SaaS solution. And I think that's what differentiated them in the market. It created a big boost for the revenues they were gaining, and they became a disruptor in the AdTech industry. It made them a clear player in that area, and they recently signed with Rutana, one of the biggest media companies here in Saudi, because of what they built. It's something unique. It's something people need. All of these new startups need to understand data more, and data is the new.
Yeah, we'll talk more about data now. There's a risk in data. But how did they get this international investor to convince them to make their very first investment in MENA region?
So I think Omar and Sarah bin Laden, who are the founders, are the best type of founders you can find. They are the real hustlers who know where to be, where to go, who to talk to, and utilize their network really well. Whether it was reaching out to me or reaching out to all the angel investors or VCs that were connected to them, they're always wanting to give back also to the community. So Sarah especially volunteers in many of the women initiatives of Saudi and making sure people educate about women in tech and making sure they're more inclusive in that, and similar to Omar. So I think many of these initiatives in the end will reach to the right people who can hear your pitch and understand what they're doing and be convinced that this is the right solution for them.
Okay, so let's talk about data, and I'll ask Hamid first because you might be biased. So Hamid, with increasing privacy regulations globally and the lack of such regulations in here in the MENA region, how are MENA AdTech startups navigating this? Do they voluntarily follow those regulations, or do they sell our data to the biggest bidder? What do you think?
I mean, honestly, I don't have a factual answer, so I can't speak for them. But I feel like before regulation is introduced, I mean, startups will not do that. So, I don't think they're just going to go out of their way and create more, layers and, because for a founder, more layers means more cost and less time. So I just feel like they won't do it. And we are very much in a data economy right now. And I usually avoid these buzzwords, but, when we kind of talked about the podcasting bit 40 minutes ago, it was all about how do you stand out from a lot of noise, essentially. And the same thing would apply to data, right? So there's a lot of behavioral data out there. How do you make sense of that? And I think if you're able to synthesize that in something that could be valuable, then I feel like startups would be selling that for a revenue stream. That's just my point of view. I think people value privacy a lot as a concept, but when it comes down to it, are they actually acting on those words? I think that's a huge question for me, a huge question mark.
Okay, let me stay with you, Hamid. So how can an international investor like Hearst Lab help a regional AdTech company here? Whether it's in regulations or anything, what value can they add from their expertise?
So look, I think a lot of these international investors who have invested in companies that are doing similar things in more, let's say, advanced economies, or that have invested in the company that's hit, 30, 40, 50 million in ARR, they can come in and say, look, here are two product designers and product managers that have built this product in, market X. Sit with these guys and learn how they've kind of ironed out the kinks on the product side. I feel like that could be a huge advantage. It's kind of like having a shadow co-founder with you there. And also they could kind of point out the roadblocks that they see coming. Like, hey, we're going to have our version of this privacy law coming in the next couple of years. So prepare for it from today. And also seize the advantage that you have from not having it today. So I feel it's all about their experience in building these much larger companies elsewhere and just kind of translating that experience to our founders here.
Hussein, what do you think? What value can international investors add? And if you want to comment on the data.
Yeah, let's do the data one, because I think that's one of the key things we asked once before we invest. We knew it was coming and it came. We have a new data privacy regulation And anyone who's living in Saudi now has received in the past 2 weeks more than 100 SMS from all the corporations confirming their data is safe. They can be opting out from all the advertisement and so on, because it has come into works, and now all corporations have to comply with it. And Quantum saw that from the beginning. Since they started, data was very important, all the security and measures they have put in to make sure all of that is safe. And again, what they built is the engine that allows these different operators or channels to be able to manage their own data. So giving them the capability to give them the privacy, the aggregator model to make sure you don't really know who is what doing, but again, it reaches to the right people in the end. These are all the right measures for a data privacy part. When it comes to the US investors, yes, definitely. It's the experience. And in the end, MENA as a whole ecosystem is a new ecosystem in terms of entrepreneurship. We're just seeing the beginnings of the startup ecosystem and everything. So definitely international investors come in with their expertise from people they've invested before, models they've seen, especially global ones that might have invested in Latin America or other similar ecosystems as ours, are the ones that would be able to add much more value, because again, our distributed population across borders is a differentiating thing here in MENA. When we look at the market size, it's always about MENA. But when you realize, okay, it's Saudi and Egypt and UAE and Algeria, and these are all different ecosystems of where you can really operate and the support you can get. So knowing how to navigate all of these jurisdictions and being able to operate in them is a unique model that people in MENA need to understand how to do it well. And there's only a handful of startups that have gone through this journey so far. Many of them have received international investors, and these are the ones that are helping them know how it should be done.
Now we're moving to another story where a regional VC firm invested globally. Jamie, what's happening in Egypt?
Yeah, let's flip the script. Belt One Venture Capital, so they're a subsidiary of Belt One Holdings, and they've made their first international investment, as you mentioned. So they've acquired a strategic stake in Velivelo. So it's a French e-bike rental company. Size of the investment has not been disclosed. There is a MENA connection. The three founders are all Moroccan, and they're originally part of Endeavour as well. So the startup itself was founded in 2017, provides over 5,000 e-bikes to last mile delivery professionals in France, Spain, Morocco. They're hoping to grow the footprint in Spain and Belgium, as well as the region as well, hence this investment. So in terms of the offering, it's a subscription model, so it allows customers to access the turnkey solution, ready-to-use e-bike, insurance, regular maintenance, access to a software platform as well for fleet management. So yeah, Belt One are going to help them out.
This is a new trend I'm noticing here recently. Many regional VCs are looking global. They're investing outside the region. Why? Is it to diversify, or is there any other reason? Is it good, bad for our ecosystem, for MENA startups? What do you think?
Ahmad, in case some of the viewers didn't know, Silicon Badia invests in the US as well, as the MENA region. Look, I think for me that there's only good things that would come out of more diversified investing into other markets. I mean, whether you're just chasing returns or yield, or you're doing it for a strategic reason, I think in this case it's probably a bit strategic, or it's a bit of both, right? Like you always have to chase commercial returns. Like that should be like kind of a bedrock of any asset manager's kind of thesis book. But I think in this case, it's I'm investing in a French company that's coming to the region, so there's a bit of a bridge to be built there, and we see that all the time. I think thinking about tech companies, you can't really think about borders, right? I mean, unless you're doing a marketplace that's very hyper local, but the whole idea is that tech can scale beyond your borders. You can find users with common traits in LATAM as you would in Europe, as you would in the Middle East. And, you could hopefully build a product for these guys. So of course, I think looking at different markets is incredibly important, but so is being focused in your strategy. So it has to kind of make sense in a narrative.
The way the ecosystem was done before is where everyone is investing international. So all what was happening in Saudi, there was no ecosystem in Saudi or in MENA. and everyone was investing in the US and Europe and so on, and that was the norm. And then once the ecosystem started to be built here, and everyone started to raise funds from the funds of funds, SVC and Jeddah, the real focus of all these VCs was on MENA. And that's where they felt the biggest returns could be, where they can actually have a competitive edge compared to investing abroad. And it was the key thing. I think now some diversification into international ones is just a return to the past, where you need to just diversify, make sure you're not overexposed into MENA. And again, adding to what Ahmed said, is the strategic value. If you're investing because you want to bring them in, I think that hasn't stopped from before. It's just been, we're really focused on MENA. So we're seeing all these big news, all of these investments. We're all excited about what's happening to MENA. Having international ones come in, I think us as maybe in Tech Investcom, it's always been a worrying part for us. We haven't done any of those because we believe an advantage for people who lived here, who have the strong network compared to ones international coming to expand, is always was a part of our thesis. That's why we always try to back the ones in MENA. But again, people who might have done it, who have some background, like given them they are Moroccan founders, might give them the edge needed to be able to do it in the right way. But I think that the trend won't stop, but not maybe the local VCs. I think family office, strategic ones that have businesses that can give them some added advantage into expanding here.
Just a comment in general about this piece of news. I think what was interesting to me about it was how a VC firm invested in this kind of business, which again is very hardware reliant, right? So the product is essentially an e-bike. You know, how you get the e-bike to the customer, you could kind of call that as like the tech-enabled part of the service. And you typically see more private equity kind of type investor, you know, getting into this field. So I really feel like that's kind of the very interesting bit for me, where you're having VC firms and PEs also kind of dipping into what was traditionally another's lane, if you will, no pun intended. Yeah, so I feel like you'll see a lot more of that in the coming years.
So you took us to discuss the business model of the company. Yes, the business model, or the traditional business model for e-bikes, is basically targeting consumers. And we've seen those, like you see the bikes in the streets, you rent the bike for, I don't know, 10 minutes, 15 minutes, you leave it somewhere else. And cities started to fight those companies because bikes were everywhere. But this company is a bit different. What they're doing is they're renting those bikes to professionals, delivery drivers, freelancers, transport companies, etc. And it seems it's working. Do you see this model working in the MENA region? I know for sure, for example, in Jordan, it's really hard. There is no bike lanes. Jordan is all, you know, valleys and hills and mountains. It's really hard to use a bike for delivery. But maybe in Dubai, they're working on bike lanes, or maybe they already did some bike lanes in some areas. What do you think?
Yeah, sure. I mean, just to address the first part of the question, do I think this business model could be supported? Of course. I mean, think about the number of companies renting cars. I mean, okay, we're using e-bikes, which is, you know, very modern. So, but essentially it's the same comparison, right? Like it's, you know, people need to get around. Are they getting around enough? No. Can we do it through e-bikes? Yes. I definitely think, you know, better infrastructure and let's say rule of law on the street kind of bodes better for this kind of thing. So maybe Dubai, maybe KSA. But again, I think it's a lot about inter-community travel as well. So you're kind of just traveling within like the confines of a large neighborhood versus getting on Sheikh Zayed Road and going from one end to the other. So I think that I think that could work there. Although I do think that maybe the bigger use case would be traveling within Egypt, right? So there's huge traffic jams, but then can you support a bike lane? You know, I think that's an interesting question mark for me.
You mean as a taxi?
Yeah, just in general, like just mobility in general, like getting from one place to another, right? So whether it's taxis or delivery drivers or so on, whichever beachhead you want to start with. But yeah, I think addressing the infrastructure bit is very important.
The biggest competitor for this in Egypt would be the tuk-tuk.
Yeah.
Hussein, what do you think?
Well, I can speak about Saudi. We were all thinking, will Saudi be a host of these type of solutions? And to be honest, in my opinion, we haven't seen that yet. The most these solutions were able to expand into areas where walking was acceptable. Again, given the weather conditions, given the bike lanes, given areas where you can actually do it without going through much hassle. There aren't much yet places to do that here. Areas like the new ones like Diriyah or the new green park that for King Salman, these are the areas people are hoping where bikes and scooters will be much more available. And I think they're part of events also. When it gets too crowded, you need a way to go in. But I don't think the model will work in the region yet due to the weather conditions and the lack of people walking and utilizing these lanes. This is the reality of what I'm seeing. But again, I can be proven wrong.
Let me ask the other side of the question that I asked before. What value add can built-on venture capital bring to Velo if they're expanding here? Like a regional VC, what can they add value to an international company coming to the region? So maybe we'll tell them, hey, this model doesn't work as is. Maybe you should fix it. Maybe they would work on motorcycles, not on bikes. I don't know. In general, not necessarily this company. What value can a local VC provide to an international company coming to the region?
I think it's usually around helping them with the regulation, helping them with finding talent, being part of the conversations of where decision making might be happening on a city planning level. These are the ones, the added value you want to find from VCs when you're trying to expand into MENA, because it is a hard place to navigate. No matter how much like good advertisement you hear about the country, and there is some support, but to really be able to gain on any of them, you need a local partner that understands what are the right papers, who are the right people to talk to be able to get those.
Yeah, I agree with that. I would stress talent as well. I think a big selling point for our region, especially when you're considering a company coming in from Europe, is there is the right labor pool here at an amazing price point. So I think helping them out with that and kind of having them see that is very important. And then you have, kind of strategic partners along the way, right? So somebody like Hussein would know very well, just, in a 15-minute conversation with Hussein, you can know, who should I partner up with? Who should I avoid? What should I do here? Is this a good company? Can you kind of vet this guy? So let's not forget the human element of all these interactions. And I think having somebody who's been there for 10, 20 years, tremendous value. The last one, which I think is kind of a minor point, is a local partner can help with subsequent fundraising from the region as well.
Well, with that, thank you for adding value to our podcast. Hussein and Hamid, thank you so much for joining us today. And Jamie, as always, thank you so much for getting us all the news.
Thank you, everyone. Cheers, guys.